Welcome to the CADWOLF tutorial on line, spline, and scatter charts. So we're going to start off with a quick example just to show you how to create a chart and to get going on it. Then we're going to do a sort of detailed discussion on what all is available to you in the plot dialog for these types of charts. Then we're going to go back to our example and do some fairly detailed stuff with it. Alright, so you remember from our general discussion on plots that they're just interactive. There's really no programming involved. So let's start off here with the document where we've created some variables, some arrays of data, and we're going to click to enter a chart. And when we do, we get the default chart dialog. Here you can edit the type of chart, select exactly what type of data you're changing below, and then where you add or delete specific instances of that data or axes or anything like that. So let's just add a quick data set, and in the area to edit the data, we'll enter X and Y, which were the names that we gave to two of the variables in the document. You can see that the chart is populated with the data after we hit enter. Let's go over to the appearance and let's just turn on the data labels, which is one option you have to. What this is just the numerical values shown above each point there. So that's the sort of thing you can change in the appearance. Let's change the name of the data set from the default value, and you'll see it update in the legend there. So that's just a quick basic example of how to enter a line data chart. So let's see what's the difference between a line chart and a spline chart. Well, you can see that the line just draws a line from point to point there in the chart. You go to a spline chart and it's going to curve that line so that it looks like it's going from point to point in a better manner. So you could create this chart and delete or not show the actual point data, and it would look smooth and continuous. A scatter chart is really just a line chart where the line value has been set to 0. So you see the points, but you don't actually see the lines connected to them. In functionality, there's really not much difference between these three types of charts, which is why we're talking about them all together. So let's go ahead and set this back to a line chart, and we're still editing the chart data. So we're going to set the line value back to 1, and let's add another instance of a data set here. And what you'll see is that when we do this, some default data is added of 0. So you can actually see it appear there. So we're going to add X and then the Y2 vector that was created in the chart, or in the document, I'm sorry. Okay, it looks like the X is not quite the same length as the Y2, so let's go in and give it some data within the chart here, which is possible. So we're just going to enter a vector from 1 to 10. And this vector is not going to exist outside the chart, but this is just a quick way that you can plot data. So you can solve any equation within the X or Y data here as we're solving for this array, but it doesn't exist anywhere else in the chart. It doesn't have a name like an equation does. Alright, so this was just meant to give you a quick introduction to how a chart works. Pretty much every type of data that you're editing on the chart functions the same way. You have a sort of block where you enter or delete an instance, and then you have a block beneath it at the bottom there where you edit the values of those instances. So let's talk about all the different sections of the plot dialog here. So the main area will contain the actual plot or chart. The size of the chart within this section will reflect the way it will look on the actual document itself. On the right side, you have the format section. This is where you select what you're editing, add the different items to the chart, and edit their properties. So you have the top part here where you select the type of chart you're actually working on. The second part will let you select what you're adding to the chart, or what you're formatting within the chart, be it the data, the axes, or anything like that. The next section is where you add specific instances of that to the chart. As we saw, we added instances of data sets. You can add instances of axes and bands and lines and text, which you'll see in a minute. The bottom section will appear different depending on what you're actually editing, be it data, axes, text, bands, etc. Alright, so what are your options? If you're selecting data in that section, you can add or delete data sets, edit the X or Y data, set what axes that data falls on, and then edit the appearance of the data series on the chart. In the chart format section, you can show or hide the title and subtitle and edit those contents. You can change the size and margins of the charts. You can edit the legend, which is change its placement and change how it's shown on the chart. Selecting the X or Y axis will let you add or delete the appropriate axes. Edit the setup of the axes, such as change the labels on it, the max min, whether or not it's linear or logarithmic. change its appearance, and just change how the tick marks appear for that axis. By selecting the bands, you can add and delete bands to the chart, set their start and end location, as well as what axis they lay on and what color they have. We're going to show what bands are in just a minute. To place a line in the chart, you select the chart lines option. You can add and delete them here, set their location, and their axis and color as well. Now, chart text is a little bit more involved. You can add text to it by selecting it, set its location, size, and color, but you can also set variables on it. We're going to show how to do that in just a second. So let's go back to our chart and let's select the chart format. And from there, let's turn the title on and just give it a default title to show how that can change at the top there. Let's give it a subtitle by turning it on and entering the text. As you can see here, we can change the height and width of the chart, as well as change the margins at the top, left, bottom, right. You can turn the legend on and off. The default is on. You can change the layout of the legend, vertical, horizontal, where it lies in the chart in terms of top, middle, or bottom, as well as left, middle, or right. So we'll just place it in the middle right just to show you how that changes. And you can give a specific offset as well. Alright, so let's go ahead and into the bands. We'll skip the axes for now. And what you'll see is that when we open the bands, it looks a lot like the data. You simply add an instance. You can set the start and end value here. So we'll start it at, say, 8. And we'll have it go to 10. And you have to pick what axis you want it to lie on. Since we only have one y-axis, we'll select that, and there it is there. Now remember, each chart is created with a default x and y axis, and you can add more. We'll go over to the lines, add a line instance, and set the same sort of parameters. And here we'll set it on the default x-axis. It's kind of hard to see there, so let's tell you what. Let's change the value it lies on to 3, and let's change the color so we can see it a little bit better. We'll give it black. Let's make it gray so that it doesn't conflict with something we might do later. And there you have it. We've set bands and the line within our line chart here. These are useful to show like areas of data or limiting lines or something like that. And we can now add a text block. It looks the same as the bands and lines and data. You simply add an instance, and you'll see the default text appears in the top left there. Let's set it to, say we want to show the display of the first occurrence of the y value. You can enter or show data in text by preceding the value you want to show by a pound sign. Now, every value in CADWOLF is an array, so if it's a single value, you want to show it in the 0, 0 mark. But here, this is a vector, so we want to show, say, the first instance of the y1 variable, so we show it at 0, 0. And so the first time when we just typed it, it shows as text, and the second time it shows as the value. And then we move it over to the 100, 100 pixel mark. All right, so let's go back into our data, and let's go ahead and delete one of these dataset instances here, and let's go, let's say, into the appearance. Let's go ahead and set it to the y3 value, which was a sinusoid over a couple of 0 to, I think, 4 pi. So we set the name to y3. Let's go ahead and turn the data labels off because it's going to be a lot of points, so we don't want those labels for each point. As you can see, the sinusoid there. So let's say we want to show something smooth. We don't want the markers for each point. So we can go in here and turn the markers off. You could also change the color, the shape, and a number of other things for the markers. We'll go ahead and turn it back on. So as you can see, you can set the label, set how it appears, and also determine whether or not this specific data set appears within the legend. So let's go back to our axes now, and let's take a look at some of those. Let's go over to the y-axis. You can see, like I said, every chart is created with a default x and y axis. Let's add a second one, and we'll give it a label of, say, second axis. And you notice that you don't see it anywhere right now. We're going to put it on the opposite side, on the right side, instead of on the default left side. And notice you still don't see it. The reason you don't see it is since the chart was initially created with one axis, there's a set default set margin side on the right, which is just 10, so it doesn't show. So we'll set it to 100 pixels, and now you can see the axis. So what's the value of having 2 or more axes? Well, if you want to visualize 2 sets of data that have widely varying values, you can set one on each axis and you get a better representation of them. So here we've got an array that has a high value in the 1000 area, and our other initial array, which is we'll set this back to y1 so that they're about the same length. That array has a much lower set of data. It's like around the 10 to 15 range. So when you're plotting it next to the 1000 value, you don't really see it. So what we can do is we can go into this high data set here. We'll change the label so you know what it is. And we can simply set the axis that it lies on in the Y section to the second axis. So these are on 2 different axes. So you can see the second axis, second set of data applies to the second axis, and the first data. So you can visualize these 2 sets of data on the same chart without one being flushed out by the other. Well, that's it for line, scatter, and spline charts in CADWOLF. Remember, there's a full tutorial on our documentation workspace that shows you all the options that you can have for all charts. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for all the updates that are coming out.